Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. To our OG listeners, leave us a review over at your favorite podcast app. We would very much appreciate that. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Buddy, I'm feeling fantastic. I think this show is worthy of an early crack of the beer. You know, we're hanging out. Look at you. It's one of those days.
Get my little Arsenal logo in the frame there.
Of course. There we go.
Yeah. Nice shirt.
There we go.
To you as well, man.
I appreciate it. You know, I think it's in our banner image. I was actually thinking about that. I was like, this shirt hasn't been in the rotation lately, but I figured I'd break it out for an important episode like this. And, you know, we're just over here in the USA having a completely normal one over here, guys. Don't look at us. Everything's fine in the United States of America. Everything's going great. Everything's going as planned. We're going to be A-okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. To be honest, I've kind of checked out a little bit from everything going on. I've been heavy into this, like, Olympics women's preview coverage. You know, we're going to knock through our tiers today, get everyone slotted, which is going to be a super tough exercise. So I've been totally heads down in my research here. I mean, you could tell me fucking Joe Biden dropped out of the election, and I mean, I don't know, that'd be news to me. So with that said, where do you want to get started?
Well, I think we should describe the conceit of this episode. How are we going to talk about these teams? Let's rely on the old sports radio device of the tiering system, my good man. We've done it a few times on this program before, in the NWSL and other competitions. So I think it's only right. Let's dust it off, bring it back for the Olympics. We have some teams that slot nicely. Maybe we'll have some discussion. Maybe we'll have some disagreement on it. But let's place these teams on neat little tiers for us to kind of watch for going into the tournament.
I love it. So we did a little pre-gaming beforehand. We landed basically on 4 tiers that we like. So bottom tier, that's going to be our participation ribbon tier. Basically, happy to be here. Let's not get hurt. Let's keep these games close. Let's keep these games respectable. One level up from that is the bronze tier. So this is a team probably loses in the quarterfinals, but could also maybe steal the bronze, make the semis. So that's second to the bottom. Our silver tier, this is a team that I think we want to believe can reach the final, but probably more of like a third place bronze medal type team. And then there's the gold tier. These are teams that we believe can win it all just flat out. In this first tier, the participation ribbon tier, we're going to put 4 teams in here, right? So these need to be the teams that we don't believe are advancing. So real quick, the top 2 teams in the 3 groups, that's 6 teams total, are going to make the quarters, which means 2 third place teams are also going to make the quarters. Now, how that tiebreaker works, it's just total points, then it's goal difference, then it's total number of goals scored. And then from there, I think there's some fair play stuff. It gets a little wonky. So 1 third place team is not going to make the quarterfinals. None of the 4th place teams are going to make the quarterfinals. So I think as we roll out this participation ribbon tier, let's keep that in mind. Who do we think is finishing bottom of the group? And then which third place team do we think is going to be the unlucky team to be on the wrong end of some of those tiebreakers?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will say, after goals scored for the third place tiebreakers, yep, it's fair play points and, you know, deductions for if somebody gets a straight red, people who get yellow cards, et cetera, et cetera. And the 5th tiebreaker, the drawing of lots. So, you know, let's see if we get down to that. I know we had that situation in the CONCACAF W Gold Cup. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, though. All right, let's get into it. Let's take turns kind of naming a team, and let's see if we agree putting that team in that tier. Does that sound about right?
Well, we drew lots before the show. You came out on top, so go ahead and kick us off.
Very good at lot drawing myself. All right, let's kick it off. You know, no disrespect to this team. Some teams just aren't going to advance in this tournament. Let's kick it off with the Football Ferns of New Zealand. I do not think they have the firepower to get through. Where do you land on this squad?
I agree with that. I think probably least talented team top to bottom. They're going to really need to muck up these games to scratch out any kind of result. And ultimately, the field is so stacked that you don't just need one result. Even a big upset win from New Zealand wouldn't be enough to kind of carry them through. So full cosign. They are in my participation ribbon tier. All right, so I'm going to go up next. This one was a tough one. I've got Nigeria in my participation ribbon tier. They're in an absolutely stacked group. I think when you look at their attack, Uchenna Kanu, she's cooled off for sure. Asisa Oshwala, she hasn't looked all the way right in a good while. I think probably since moving over to the NWSL. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I just think the form is kind of cooled off. And I think ultimately this is just a pick based on the competitiveness of the field. And then the other tough thing for the Super Falcons, things get progressively more difficult for them. So they open the tournament against Brazil. No easy task there. Then it's the world champion Spain. And then if there's still anything left, anything in the tank, they've got to go heads up against Japan. So suffice it to say, they need a result versus Brazil. And I think even then might be a little tricky for our Super Falcons to advance here.
I think so. I think they'll likely have a hard time holding the ball in the midfield. You can never rule out in an Adozi game. Maybe it comes against Spain. Maybe it comes against Japan. I agree with you here. I also had them in my participation ribbon tier. They were my first cut, though. I'm kind of with you on the Oshwala point where she hasn't really broken out yet. But man, like, it could certainly happen. So that's what made it tough for me. But the field is too deep. I think Group C is the real group of death or group of life, depending on how you like to look at things. So yeah, it's a participation ribbon this year for them.
Agreed. All right, so that's 2 slots down, 2 to go. Who else do you have not making it out of the group stage?
Okay, this one hurts my heart a little bit. We've rooted for this team. I'm actually curious to see where you land on them. And I hate doing this to both of the African nations. I think Zambia is in such a difficult group. I think there's a possibility that they concede way too many goals. And even if they surprise me and finish third, who knows if their goal differential is going to hold up. So I am going to posit the Copper Queens of Zambia.
Well, my friend, this is our first disagreement.
There we go. Well, I thought it could be.
So I'm with you. Obviously, we're going to be looking at a Group B team here and who's going to finish in fourth. I actually had Australia in this spot.
Okay.
So no Sam Kerr. She's such a huge figure, for this Australian team, and Chelsea Football Club is just like, okay, yeah, obviously, like, massive player, she's out. And then you look kind of up and down that Australian team, a lot of good players, but no Sam Kerrs. I mean, I think maybe Ellie Carpenter might be knocking on the door of like sort of that upper echelon type player, but ultimately this Australia side, a lot of second and third options, a lot of really good players, I think they're going to be really good and really solid. And then I think this is going to come into play when we talk a little bit more about Group B, but I feel like Group B is the group, obviously USA, Germany, Zambia, Australia, where we could see a lot of draws. We could see a lot of like knockdown, drag out, even that Spain, Japan, Brazil group, Nigeria, like you can imagine some variance there. Obviously Japan beat Spain 4-0 in the World Cup. Spain could like light it up, I feel like there's going to be, the goal differentials are going to be pretty wild there. And I think in Group B, the goal differentials are going to be a little flatter. So I actually have Australia finishing fourth in this group.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think that's my team who gets eliminated. I mean, obviously we could see a Mary Fowler kind of like explosion here. We talked to Samantha Lewis about that. But even then, man, like these teams, like you could get a massive, huge game. We talked about that with Brazil and Germany back in the World Cup. Both openers were straight fireworks. Both teams bounced out in the group stage. So it's got to be more than just one really, really good performance.
I think all of that is fair. I'll throw out there. So obviously, you talked about somebody stepping up in the absence of Sam Kerr. Samantha Lewis from ABC Sport in Australia, who you should watch that episode of our conversation with, as Dino alluded to. Courtney Vine, she's 25 years old. For Sydney in the A-League last season, she had 10 goals, 6 assists. She's headed to the North Carolina Courage. I think she's going to be trying to use her speed to get out on the counter. You mentioned Mary Fowler, 4 goals, 6 assists in 21 appearances for Manchester City last season. Let me run this one by you. Haley Rasso, 29 years old, reported to be leaving Real Madrid after 1 season. Revenge tour? Auditioning for a big contract at another club? Little, kind of working on that chemistry with Mary Fowler, 20-year-old Mary Fowler, Manchester City Football Club, kind of an up-and-coming player. And then you have Kyra Cooney-Cross, 22 for your Arsenal, 2 assists in 14 appearances for your Lady Gunners. Another player who has a high ceiling and an opportunity to kind of just grow her profile and then go back to Arsenal, go back to London and say, play me more. Like, this is like, did you see what happened back there? And I think you're going to be surprised actually where I have Australia on my tiers. Spoiler alert, I think this is going to be the biggest gap that we have.
Oh, wow.
So I get where you're coming from. I like the way you put it, a lot of second options. I just wonder, is it the time that Mary Fowler or Courtney Vine evolve into a first option?
Could be, certainly could be. All right, so we'll put a pin in that one. You've got Zambia here. I've got Australia here. We'll make some final decisions. We want to come together as a team as we're entering this giant tournament, get into full alignment, get all of our X's and O's in a row, and come up with one set of definitive pre-Olympics tiers. So that's kind of like that's the big objective. That's the piece of plastic that we slap before we go out onto the pitch.
Aligned tiers, bang. All right, I like it.
My fourth team not advancing. This one was a heartbreaker. Apologies to the legend Julia Belas-Trindade. I don't think Brazil is making it out of the quarterfinals. We talked about the group dynamics, and I think this is where the tiebreakers play a huge role, because I think the goal differential ramifications of playing Japan and playing Spain, and maybe even Nigeria also, I think just could be too devastating. So Brazil could be a team that beats Nigeria 3-0 or 3-1 or something of that sort, and then just sort of backslides from a goal differential standpoint. So I think once I kind of ran through a quick simulation on my notebook, I just don't think Brazil has the defensive prowess. I think those more organized teams, the Spains, the Japans, are going to put too big of an L on this Brazil side for them to be able to overcome. I think one of those teams in the group, maybe, but those two I think are just too overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. They were close for me, so I think I could be swayed. Yeah, you have Tarsiana. You talk about her; she's like still developing. So like, how much can you really ask this 20-year-old? I think she is somewhere around there, like a young 20s player. Like, hey, I'm going to need you to anchor the defense against Spain and Japan. That could be tough. Not a great spot to be in. My last participation ribbon tier team, I had Colombia, who I knew that I thought that would hurt your heart to leave them out too. I think they might end up being vulnerable in defense. You kind of saw it play out in the World Cup. They're able to get through the group stage, but then put in a good effort, have tough, smart players, just not quite enough talent around. So those were two teams that I thought maybe could be interchangeable. So I had Brazil in my bronze tier and Colombia as one of my first one out after Nigeria. So I feel like they're in a similar ballpark.
I think that's fair. Let me tell you what I liked about Colombia.
Yeah.
So first things first, they share a group with New Zealand. So I feel
that's going to help.
That's essentially like it's almost like a bye week in the old NFL playoffs, where it's just like, oh, this is a huge advantage, right? So I think, unfortunately, I think that's 3 points and a pretty nice jumpstart on the goal differential conversation.
Sure.
I really like the firepower of Colombia. I mean, just to kind of like scoot ahead, I had them in my bronze tier.
Okay.
So it looks like we've got Colombia, Brazil sort of flip-flopped. And I think ultimately what it came down to is I think having New Zealand in your group is enough to just be like, okay, this might be a free 3 and a nice goal differential boost. Brazil does not have the benefit of that, which is why I had those teams where they did. So can I talk you into flipping those two?
I can buy that. I think that is a fair point. I do it with a heavy heart. Same with you. I know we got a lot of love for Brazil, the way they play football as a nation in general. I mean, Gabby Nunes for Levante, 11 goals, 4 assists in Liga F last year. That's good for top 10 in that league. We've talked about the form that Adriana has been in for your Orlando Pride, especially lately. 3 goals and an assist in the NWSL. Let me just put it out there. I have in my notes, Caroline, what can they get from her? Could she possibly be the difference between playing for a medal or being bounced before you get to the knockout stage? I think that's a heavy question. And I know it's hard to put that kind of expectation on a player returning from an ACL. But I thought in our discussion with Julia Belas-Trindade for The Guardian, who you should read her work and go back and watch that episode, it seems like the courage has been purposely leaving her out so she could be peak coming into the Olympics. Man, that really kind of gets some ideas going in my head. But I think you're right about the competition being stiff. It's tough to put Carolina in there and be like, good luck against Spain and Japan. And Nigeria, for that matter, because they'll play physical defense.
100%. I think it's really like underselling it to call her an X factor. But right. she could absolutely swing this team's fortunes big time. It's wild to think this whole tournament's going to go down over the course of 17 days. It's nuts. Like you gotta get through 6 matches successfully over 17 days. So go figure. All right, so bronze tier. I covered Colombia. That's my first bronze tier team. Who do you have in your bronze tier?
I can't quit them. I'm going to put Germany in this tier. Never write off Germany. The Lena Oberdorf ACL injury
Brutal.
really sucks. Giant bummer. Good luck to Lena in her recovery. We wish her a full and speedy recovery, as we always do. We say it too much in this show as the ACL epidemic continues in this sport. We're just hoping for some solutions and hopefully some better practices, or just even discovery of what the better practices are in this sport. But kind of moving past that, the Oberdorf injury, I think it lowers the ceiling. They still have a good roster. I think when I look at Germany, and I was kind of thinking about that roster and those players, and going back and watching some of their games, they have to stop with the high turnovers. They do not have a good enough defense to survive giving the ball away in their own defending third. And they need to start hammering teams with set pieces. Leah Schuler had 6 goals and 2 assists in their last 6 Euro qualifying matches. Clara Buell had 5 goals and 1 assist in Euro qualifying. Julia Gwynn has 3 goals and 1 assist in Euro qualifying. And then when I said that to myself out loud, as I was kind of watching some old games and thinking about looking at the roster, if you are a team and your keys are, we have to stop turning the ball over high and we need to cash in on set pieces, then your ceiling is probably a bronze.
I agree with that. Yeah, and I think it'd be a bit of a stretch to even get that bronze. I did a whole faux wacky bracket on my side. I had the same German side getting through the group stage, but getting bounced in the quarters. I just don't think they have the firepower. I think defensively, they're too much of a mess. We talked about this with Brady O'Toole on our USA preview show. Clinched or no clinched, you still kind of have to, Merle Froms can't be out here, butterfingering the ball and just kind of giving away goals, just willy nilly.
Yeah.
Especially just weeks. Well, I mean, now it's we're days away from it's coming up real fast. Cannot wait. But yeah, I think they're just too sloppy. And I think the turnovers you mentioned is a great call too. Certainly symptomatic of just a team that's not really firing totally on all cylinders. So I also had them in my bronze tier.
All right. In agreement. Boom.
So I've got Zambia as my third bronze tier team. Okay. I've only got 3 in the bronze tier, and I've got Zambia here. I think they might have lucked out with their draw, to be honest. We talked about Germany, their defensive shortcomings. Australia, too. The great Sam Lewis was on the show talking about, gets a little spotty defensively. And I think when you're going up against Banda, when you're going up against Kundanaji, in the NBA and NFL, when a player gets drafted, what do they always say is the first thing that is the biggest difference from the last place that they played, making the leap up to the professionals? It's the speed, right? So playing Banda, playing Kundanaji, and just the quick turnaround nature of it. And I know Germany knows this Zambia side pretty well, knows Banda pretty well. Australia's got some athletes too, but I think it's just going to be too fast. I think there's going to be an adjustment period. It'll take a lot for them to kind of make a leap, but on the same token, you don't expect the 8 favorites to be the 8 that qualify. Kind of do expect a little bit of variance here. And I think Zambia might have lucked out, drawing a Germany, drawing an Australia. If they can scratch something out against you, I think they're going to be able to score. It's just going to become defensively, are they going to be able to stay in these games? And I think Group B has a lot of 1-1s, 2-2s, 1-0, 2-1. I think these are going to be close games in this group.
Okay, I can buy all that. I mean, obviously, if I had them in the participation ribbon tier on my individual tiers, it's not a big stretch to put them in the bronze tier. So I think you raised some good points. I mean, the speed is a problem. We saw the speed present a problem for Germany in those pre-World Cup matches in 2023. I worry if they're going to have enough of the ball to not just be completely run ragged before they get those chances, but good luck running some supreme athletes like that. Good luck tiring them out in the first 180 minutes that they play. Maybe you might be able to get away with that in their third match in 6 days or something like that, but maybe they're already qualified by then. So I'm with you. Let's put the Copper Queens on the bronze medal tier.
All right. So does that mean you're swapping them? You're not swapping them, right?
I'm not swapping them, buddy, because here's the curveball. In my tiers, I only had Brazil and Germany in the bronze tier.
Okay.
So we've already kicked Brazil down to participation ribbon. Now we got Zambia up top.
So that means we've only got 3 in participation now. Nigeria, New Zealand, and Brazil.
Now we got a math problem that I didn't expect, and I'm terrible at math.
I mean, it really just depends. Okay, so I had Australia finishing fourth just because I do harken back also to the World Cup where, even when they get past France, it's a 0-0 that goes to PKs, so I think like I'm a little weary of their scoring prowess in a quick tournament like this and them not being at home, which we saw them at home in the World Cup. I think I could be okay. Well, let me throw this your way. You don't seem too enthused about this German side. Is there a world where Germany finishes fourth in this group?
I certainly think there is. I think it's on the board. Yeah.
So let me propose this. Let me propose this. Fuck, this is wild. But let's move Germany down to the participation ribbon tier because I like Zambia advancing. I'm on my soothsayer shit this evening.
Mm-hmm.
I lit some candles. I was tracking some stars and some celestial beings. Moving around, and I think I like Zambia advancing. So I'd like to keep them up. I want to put Germany in our participation ribbon tier. I think we just do that.
Okay, I think we can make that work because as I've pretty much spoiled it by saying there were only two teams on my bronze tier. I had Australia in my silver tier. And that was because I liked Tony Gustafsson. I thought he made a lot of adjustments. Samantha Lewis pointed to that. He has them play different ways. He's an adjustments guy. I like a lot of their young talent. I do think they're kind of poised to all kind of start taking those collective steps together. You see Sam Kerr have a big injury like this. They all kind of got to be looking at each other like Father Time's undefeated. Eventually, Sam Kerr's not going to play for our side anymore. I'm pretty high on them, but I say if we move Germany there, I'm cool with putting Australia into the bronze tier. Is that kind of what you're envisioning?
So right now that would put us, this is funny, we're doing the show behind the show on the show. So that would put us participation, Nigeria, New Zealand, Germany, Brazil, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then for bronze, that means that we've got Colombia and Zambia. The textbook definition for the bronze is probably loses in the quarters. This team could also win bronze. Mm-hmm. Do we think Australia meets that criteria? Probably loses in the quarters. Could their ceiling might be a bronze?
I think so. I'd say that's the more reasonable tier. I think they're a threat to make the semis and either lose in the bronze medal match or win the bronze.
Okay, I love it. All right, so that means I had them in the fourth tier. You had them in the second tier. They're going to settle nicely right into the third tier.
Look at that.
We keep it moving. There we go. Love it. All right, silver tier. I've got two teams here. I think you've got one left here because we bumped Australia down. So I'll go first here. Give me Canada, silver. Super solid, a lot like Colombia. They share a group in New Zealand. We can't overlook that simple fact. You kind of wonder, Adriana Leon, who we talked about on the preview show for Canada, if she can really carry all of that load. But in this instance, I do think that all of their units are strong, all the way back to goalkeeper, right? So it's they don't have that absolute killer in attack, but I love the unit. I think the unit got a lot of good talent on it, and they're going to be tough to contend with. Athletically, they're an impressive team. I do think this team could reach the semis. If things broke perfectly for them, I could see this team sneaking into the final. Obviously, this is our defending gold medal squad. So yeah, I think this is the right spot for this Canada team.
I think so too. I'm in agreement with you. They are also who I had in the silver tier. I'll say this was them and another squad were the two toughest for me because I did also think, okay, well, if I'm putting somebody in the silver medal tier, and I kind of played with that a little bit with Australia, but for Canada and this other team we'll talk about shortly, I'm sure, I did think well, if I think Canada could win the silver medal, then they're on the board to win the gold. Because if you make the final, you can win the final. Something weird can happen. And even if you're up against Spain, you could nick one and you could possibly get it. I'm glad you bring up Adriana Leon. Almost beat the USA by herself, and she believes. She was their lone goal scorer in the 23 World Cup, which I had to remind myself. I had to go back. I was staring at the stats. I was like, yeah, that is right, isn't it? But luckily, she has capable teammates on her side with her. Evelyn Viens, 27 years old, played at Roma last season in Serie A, 13 goals, 6 assists. She's a top goal scorer in Serie A. She also had 1 goal in the UEFA Women's Champions League, and she was 4th in Serie A in assists with those 6. So a productive player. And then Miriam, you speak of Miriam Karabi from She Scores Bangers. Go subscribe to that podcast on any platform, of course. Miriam talked about Jessie Fleming. And I just couldn't agree with her more is that, sometimes she does have that little bit of tendency to kind of disappear from some matches, but she also has the ability to just for 30 to 40 minute stretches look like one of the 2 or 3 or maybe even the best player on the pitch in her ability to pick out passes, to play angles, to just kind of control the ball. You could see where sometimes she looks like the fulcrum of Portland Thorns offense in a couple matches this year. With not a ton of time with that club, obviously this is her first year with the Thorns after coming over from Chelsea, she was looking like the fulcrum of the offense to get the ball up to Sophie Smith. And so anytime you look that good on a team that has Sophie Smith on the team, you're doing something right. So I think the ceiling is high. And even though they are the defending, reigning Olympic gold medalists, I feel like we're both also trying to do our pal Miriam a favor by we're disrespecting you, Canada. You can't win the gold. And then if they come back and they do it, then we can just pull the sports radio thing and be like, well, we motivated them.
I'm pretty sure we did. And it's great point on Jessie Fleming too. When you were saying, okay, a good 20, 30 minute stretch, I totally agree with that. But Jessie Fleming is also the kind of player that can make a pass or make a play where you're like, oh, okay, almost nobody can do that.
Right, exactly.
like in a good spot.
Yep.
So I think she's got both those things going for her. And like we said, I think front to back, they're going to be really tough to contend with. I think I might surprise you here with my second silver tier team.
Let's go.
Let me know if you're ready.
I am ready.
I've got to put them here. I think the U.S. women's national team is drawing a little dead when you look at the absolute top of this field. I think this team can reach the final. I think this team will reach the semifinals. I just about lost my fucking mind last week when I was just like, give me the USA for the field. I think I was coming off a very riveting 1-0 over Mexico and a 0-0 against Costa Rica. Not sure what got into me. I think looking at the attack, and I think we'll get into some of the favorites a little bit later, but I just get mesmerized by those 3 up top.
Yes.
And then there's like excellent singular players in spots on the squad. Doesn't mean as a unit they get fully cooking, but they're excellent players all over the field, and those 3 up top are just devastating. But with that said, there's a lot still left to be desired. So a lot still left to be figured out by Emma Hayes and this team. It's not just, hey, does Emma Hayes know what to do? But can things get installed, digested, downloaded, rolled out and actually observed on the field in play, like when the tournament's going on against these top tier teams? That's when it gets a little bit tricky. And I think ultimately, the Kat Macario injury, might have popped the balloon before things even got started, just because you really did see, okay, we're missing a pretty important connector there in the middle of the field that could come into play later down the line. So I want to take a quick 20-second here. Let me know what you think of my USA in the silver tier. It doesn't sound like we're on the same page, but I'm dying to hear your feedback on this one.
I don't vehemently disagree, man. They are the team that I had the hardest time choosing between gold and silver. And it's for a lot of those same reasons. I think Lavelle is a more than capable number 10. Do I think you can play Rose Lavelle 70 minutes in 3 matches that happened in the span of like 6 or 7 days? I don't think you can. I think it would be borderline irresponsible to do that. I bet you Rose wants to be out there. I bet you Lavelle wants to play, but her injury history suggests that would not be the right thing for her. And then when you do that, and like you and I have been on this program for a while now, touting Jaden Shaw as a potential up-and-coming superstar, and Bridie O'Toole touched on it in our conversation with her. I don't think Shaw is quite that number 10 yet. I think she can grow to be that. I think she has all the physical skills and definitely the mental ability to do it. She doesn't quite have that yet. So the Macario injury is a killer, pretty devastating, maybe more so than we even thought when it first happened. So even though I had them as my last one on the gold tier, I can easily co-sign dropping them down to the silver tier with you. I think that's fair.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. Like I mentioned, I did fill out a little bracket, and in my little wacky bracket, I had Japan actually winning Group C, which pushes Spain to the second spot, because I could just see Japan like lighting up either Brazil or Nigeria, sort of like storming out ahead from a goal differential standpoint, and then just basically winning on the math. Right? Doesn't mean they're better than Spain, but it could happen. If that does happen and USA wins their group, it's USA-Spain in the quarterfinals. And I'm not necessarily rooting for anything. I like all these teams for different reasons. But the thing that I am rooting for, I want to see USA versus Spain on the field. That's the only thing I want. I want to see these two teams play head to head.
I mean, it's a guaranteed banger. It might end up being very unfortunate for USA. I think, in our conversation with Brady, I can be a little self-deprecating and say, I love a good overreaction and things like that. But I stand by. I think if USA plays Spain, I think it's probably more likely than not that it's not that close of a match. I think there are probably 2 goals between those two teams right now as it stands. And you make a great point. Emma Hayes hasn't installed everything yet, and the players aren't playing in that system with any kind of consistency yet.
Emma Hayes has talked about that specifically too. It's just like, we can't just snap a finger at everything I want everybody to do. They just do. It's just not realistic. And I think Jaden Shaw, who you brought up, I mean, she could be an excellent player, when she hits her prime. She could be an excellent player in this tournament.
Sure.
But this roster is currently constructed kind of needs Jaden Shaw to be that now, right? Which is tough because I think like Rose Lavelle, I mean, she's an excellent player too. Yeah. And it's not her fault, the injury, not even take the injuries off the table. I think Rose Lavelle is a little bit, maybe too much of like a heads down attacking type player, which is extremely valuable, right? I mean, you cannot predict where she's going to go. She can go any direction at very fast speeds and be dangerous. But against these top tier teams, we're going to have to work to get some of these goals. And we're going to have to string together 3, 4, 5 excellent passes. And I think like Roosevelt, could she do that? Sure. But like, is that her game? Is that who she is? Is that her like sort of like top tier skill? She's better at other stuff than that. So I think it sort of leaves, a pretty big vacuum for a player looking to do that. I want to fast forward though to our gold tier because we've already hit a couple of these teams. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, well, if we agree on USA as a silver, that means you've got 3 teams in your gold?
Yep, and I think it seems like we're perfectly aligned at this point.
I believe so. All right, so let's start with the champs. Spain, who we talked about a little bit. When I say the champs, so we're talking World Cup champs. And Nations League, if you want to include that.
You're disrespecting Canada.
Bring it, Miriam.
He did it again, Miriam.
No, I would never disrespect, Evelyn Viens in that squad. So Spain, when you look at that USA matchup specifically, right? And we know the USA's weakness is probably the midfield and just like the general creativity and being able to control the game from the midfield. Let's go through who Spain is sending to Paris in their midfield. Mm-hmm. From Real Madrid, you've got Teresa Abellera and Atenea del Castillo, 2 absolute home run hitters. The other 3 players in the midfield, Patri, Alexia Putellas, and only the best player on the planet, Aitana Bonmati. So they're sending those 5 in the midfield, and the USA is sending, we already know who the USA, who the USA is sending. That's going to be a long day contending with those players. I think up front is maybe where Spain doesn't necessarily have the best attacking unit. Still really great players, Caldente, Sampaoli, Jenny Hermoso are kind of like the 3 headliners there. Defensively, super solid. We already know that back line. Katakoy in goal, Batier and Carmona up the left and right hand sides. They're going to be extremely dangerous, but I don't feel bad saying that the USA is probably drawing dead against Spain. Most teams, almost every team, except for one that I want to get into soon here, might be just absolutely drawing dead against the Spanish side.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I can't walk back that I said I think there are probably 2 goals between Spain and USA on most days. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen in football. And you bring up Putellas. We talked about it back when we talked about the Champions League final with Chris Sharples from DAZN, who called that match. Putellas won the Ballon d'Or in 21 and 22, and then had that devastating injury, and kind of Bonmati took the mantle. So, as Putellas kind of keeps working back, she's coming off that incredible Champions League winning goal. You got to deal with her in the midfield. And if your team has any questions in your midfield, or even any questions in the defense, you're just not going to have a chance against this squad.
This midfield is going to dominate.
Yeah. So I'm glad you bring up the midfield. Obviously, possession is a huge indicator of kind of how your midfield is able to control a match. So let's just talk about some of the latest Euro qualifiers, understanding that these are not Olympic caliber squads, but just let's hear the numbers for a second. They had 77% of the ball in their last match versus Belgium. They had 76% of the ball versus Czechia in that weird loss where they conceded a penalty, they missed a penalty, Perejuelo hit the woodwork what felt like 8 times. The 2 fixtures versus Denmark, They had 70% of the ball in one, 74% of the ball in the other. In their first match against Czechia that they won, they had 76% of the ball. And then in their first match against Belgium, where they beat them like 7-0 or something like that, they had 72% possession. They just play keep away, and they know where everybody's going to be, and they're playing every single passing angle that they can, and you can never disrupt all of their passing lanes. They all know where each other's going to be. And just for fun, if you say, okay, well, Belgium, Czechia, Denmark, congratulations. They had 60% of the ball versus France in the UEFA Women's Nations League final, and we watched that game. Mm-hmm. That game was not particularly close either.
No, I mean, that was a total handling of that French side.
Yep.
This is where I kind of don't feel so bad about having these three teams up in that top tier, just because they could do everything. All right, so let me know who else you had in your gold tier outside of the champs.
I can't contain myself. I want to talk about Japan now.
Let's go.
I think they can win the tournament. Hinata Miyazawa, 23 years old, Golden Boot winner in the 2023 World Cup. Mm-hmm. She signed with Manchester United Football Club. Wrong Manchester club, Hinata. Come on. Anyway, she signed with Manchester United, fractured her ankle in December, went on to miss like 3 months for the Reds, making her comeback back on the national stage. Alba Fujino, another forward, 19 years old, had really just like audacious play, lots of skill in the 23 World Cup, was like one of the players that really kind of stands out in my memory. She led her squad in the WE League, the WE League in Japan, with 9 goals. She also led Japan in the last World Cup in just minutes played. I just love her creativity out there. She plays with an attitude, too, that I really like. Then you have the legend, Saki Kumagai, 33 years old. The ageless wonder continues. She played pretty well for Roma during the Champions League from what we saw. She did have some moments where she kind of looked 33 out there, but it's only natural that you're going to see this champion slow down a little bit, but we call her a champion for a reason. She was a part of that 2011 World Cup champion team for Japan. And then the last player I want to highlight, Mina Tanaka, 29 years old, of Kobe Leonessa over in the WE League in Japan, 8 goals and 8 assists, helping Kobe Leonessa to second in the WE League. They play together. They're skilled. They're audacious. They're daring. And they're smart. I'm just so excited to watch every match this team plays, just like we watched every match they played in the World Cup.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, man. I not to reference the wacky bracket again, but in my wacky bracket, I had Japan in the final.
I love it.
They're going to be just a nightmare to deal with. You didn't even mention Yui Hasegawa from Manchester City, who pretty much led the WSL in pass completion percentage from the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to be a problem, and I think you see it. Their style of play is unique, tough to deal with, tough to kind of like know where the runs are coming from. I think we saw that in the World Cup. We've seen that in some of these big tournaments. What I love about this Japan side is they obviously share a group with Spain. So we'll get Japan-Spain in the group stage, which will be a rematch from last year's World Cup. Japan blanks Spain 4-0. Spain goes on to win the whole thing. We'll get the rematch here, and we could get another rematch down the line. Well, at least that's how my bracket shook out. So I think there's going to be some real swagger to that matchup. Like, you know, both teams are going to feel like, yeah, this is just a day at the office for us. I think when they go heads up, there's not going to be any, it's not the same dynamic as we have with Spain and France, where big sister, little sister, like France is going to need to like really, go up a level, maybe 2 levels, to kind of like get over the hump versus a Spain. Japan's not going to feel like that at all.
I could not agree more. I think you're totally right. And so I went back and I watched some highlights and just kind of skipped through the match just to watch different parts of Japan's loss in the quarterfinals to Sweden at the 23 World Cup. And this is another match. Like I talked about, like kind of the weird bounces that led to Spain losing to Czechia in the Euro qualifiers. We talked about it at the time. We were watching the tournament, kind of doing our thing for a different podcast then, for a different show then. But I will go the rest of my days and maintain that Japan could have won that match against Sweden. They were not physically overwhelmed. And Sweden, you know what time it is when you go play a big Nordic country like that. They try to beat you with set pieces. They try to out-physical you. Japan was not fazed by that style of play. They still knocked the ball around. They missed a penalty in that match. They hit the crossbar a couple times. They had a couple balls off the post. They had an unlucky handball in the box to concede a penalty. So at the risk of repeating myself, they are smart and organized, but what they put on top of that intelligence and that organization is that they will take you on. They have multiple players who will take you on one and say, I can beat you with skill and speed and precision at the same time. And I just think in a condensed tournament like that, that can be a recipe for winning the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, we mentioned this, 6 matches, 17 days.
Mm-hmm.
It might take 10 matches, 30 or 40 days to kind of figure out exactly what this Japan side is doing. By that time, this tournament's going to be well over and done with, and they might be holding one of those medals. All right, so we got full alignment there. That leaves one side, and that is France. This team's loaded with talent, also shares a group with New Zealand. Asila Tufaili, she joined us for our France preview, and I think the thing that she said that really, really stuck with me is this is a little bit of now or never for France.
Yes.
There are no young players. Selma Basha, future ITC Hall of Famer, 23 years old. I think the youngest player on the squad as of right now. So this is sort of their golden generation, all the way up to like Eugénie Le Sommer, who found her way onto this team. And then you have Hervé Renard, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they're at home. And there's the big bad squad from Spain that's just gave them that work the last few times they've gone head to head.
Mm-hmm.
You sort of feel like you're going to get everything that they have in this tournament. I think if this was played in a different country, I might have dropped them down to the silver tier, but they're at home and they're just sort of like everything sort of is culminating towards maybe hopefully for them a storybook ending. But even still, you zoom out, you look at it objectively, they have tremendous players. They got a pretty clean draw with their group. Mm-hmm. So I think you do expect them to advance. And lastly, if France is able to win Group A, they will get matched up to the third place team in either Group B or C.
Okay.
They won't be matched up against the second place team in the quarters. That could potentially be Zambia or Australia or Germany for France, or it could be Nigeria or Brazil. Pretty nice pathway into the semifinal maybe for this French team.
I couldn't agree more, buddy. And let me just, it was a little sweaty as I pull it out of the koozie. 2 beer show.
Hey, I like it.
To celebrate the Olympics, let me just make sure I get this. All right, yeah, no splash. A little bit of a splash. It's all right. Be okay.
Splash.
Got napkins over here. Okay, yeah, now we're cooking. Okay, let's start with, I agree with a lot of your points, and I want to get to some of them. Let me just start with something that's a little alarming. Let's get the bad news out of the way first.
Let's do it.
And Asila Tufaili, who Dino mentioned, writes for Forbes. She referenced this and kind of how it was going for France in the Euro qualifiers. Here's something alarming for you. Here are the goal scorers for France in these 6 Euro qualifying matches. 3 by Marie-Antoinette Katoto, and then 1 by Caridatu Diani, Wendy Renard, Sakina Karshawi, Elise de Almeida, and 1 by Vicky Beccio, who is a reserve in this Olympic squad. And that's the list. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goals in 6 matches shouldn't sound that bad, but when you have the players that France has, you might want something a little better, and at worst, you might want a little better spread than that.
Yeah.
You don't, like, Katoto as a center forward, I know her job is to score goals, but you got other players who can score on that team. Like, we don't have a single Cascarino goal yet. We got to get something figured out here. So with that in mind, I completely agree with your thought process on this kind of being the last shot. I know we live in an unjust world, but Wendy Renard and Eugénie Le Sommer never winning a major international tournament feels especially unjust. I will say that, give the caveat, they won the 2017 She Believes Cup. That was a 4-team field. It was a banger of a 4-team field, though. It was USA, Germany, and England with France in there. And that's a great achievement for France. I take nothing away from that. It's not the Olympics. It's not the Euros. It's not the World Cup. Mm-hmm. So I honestly think, and I know I drew the parallel when we were talking to Asile, I drew the parallel to the English men's national team, if you can believe it. They have to play on the front foot. They have to play attacking football with the players that they have. And that first match against Colombia's defense in the opener, I think you got to set the tone for the rest of the tournament there. And so I'm just going to be locked into that one.
That's going to be a banger. A little bit of USWNT flavor also, where the midfield, more specifically the attacking midfield, a little bit of a gap there. And then you probably find this team running up the sidelines, either Karshawi or Bosch on the other side. And that kind of leads me to maybe like Grace Gayoro. Like, could she be an X factor. You know, we talked about like for the U.S., Lindsey Horan dropping back a little bit, which she kind of switched up against Costa Rica. So I think she was a little bit more forward.
Yep.
Could we see Grace Guerrero play a little bit more forward? She's a big game, big moment kind of player.
Yes.
So I think that could be somebody that you're like, hey, we just need this. We need more passes to connect. I agree with you, Katoto. She's a deadly finisher, but it sort of feels like 80, 90% of her finishes are relatively straightforward. Great ball in, great service. It's kind of like catching a lob in basketball.
Sure.
You jump up, you're really tall, you catch it, and then you slam it. So she's the ultimate lob catcher. Asil talked about this too, Noah Melmajri. So I think they're pretty locked in with who they have and how they want to play. Now it's just going to be a matter of, was that the right setup? Now, I want to get into some predictions here, only because this French side, in my bracket, I had them facing off against Japan and not beating Japan. I had Japan in the final versus Spain, France out in the semifinal. Where did you have, I'm sorry, and apologies if you didn't do this, but.
So I did not fill out a regular bracket. Well, I mean, what, you usually, it's one bracket where you go with your gut, one bracket where you do your research, and one bracket where you do a wacky bracket, because anything can happen in tournament football.
Yeah.
I did not fill out any of the three. I just kind of was going on like general ceiling. So in that scenario where you have France losing to Japan, does France win Group A?
Yeah, France wins Group A. Yeah, and like I think that's an important clarifier. Like when you actually look at how the bracket could shake out, almost every combination is in play. Right. Because anybody could finish anywhere. So there's really not, this is not Wimbledon, where it's just like, all right, the bracket is the bracket, and, Venus doesn't play Serena until the final. Right. So really this can go any number of ways. I just sort of like ranked my four. I slotted everybody in. I'll give you mine.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a pick sort of on the fly here, and apologies, I didn't do 3 brackets. I only did the wacky bracket.
Yeah. Okay.
So in my semis, I had Japan topping France, and I had Spain topping Canada.
Okay.
Because I had USA facing Spain in the first round, and I had Spain getting past them.
Gotcha.
So my 1 through 4, I've got Spain win the gold, Japan silver. Between France and Canada, I think you got to give the nod to France. So Canada makes a semifinal, but they end up with a 4th place finish. Very respectable. France takes home a medal, so not empty-handed. And shout out to Sam Ewis in the women's game, because she did a great job talking about the pursuit of a medal and the Olympics being a different kind of tournament. She was like, all right, I'm paraphrasing here, most tournaments are win or there's no alternative, right? In the Olympics, though, winning a medal, getting onto the podium, and just taking home the hardware is different than other tournaments. So shout out to Sam for kind of pointing that out. But yeah, that's my final 4, how I saw it.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Spain, Canada, France, and Japan as your final 4, which will lead to, and I think in that scenario, you're talking about France, Canada, 3rd place bronze medal match. Mm-hmm. Should be a banger. I like the idea, France versus Canada for the bronze medal. Also, winner keeps Montreal.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that happening. And if France runs into Japan, I mean, what a banger! What an incredible kind of style clash there. I could absolutely see Japan winning that match, but I'd give France a good chance. Just, I mean, with home field advantage, I feel like that would help.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I just feel like Japan would pose so many problems for them, and a lot of the same problems that Spain poses. Yeah, only differently, right? Like a different flavor of a really, really hard team to play. I don't know. How far have you thought with regard to who do you have winning, who do you have possibly making the semis? And apologies if I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, you're good. I mean, I would say I'm either a Spain beats France in the final or Spain beats Japan in the final. I'm with you on that. And in terms of who can make it to the semis, obviously I think USA is live. I think Australia is fairly live also, depending on how the bracket shakes out. But my winner, I think it's Spain. I think every team is kind of chasing them. We are looking at the 15-19 USA squad, where you walk in, you are the stone cold favorite against everybody you play against. And people act like with that era of the USA squad, it was just because they ran faster and they were more physical than every team. That's a little revisionist. I mean, Carly Lloyd, I have a lot of opinions about Carly Lloyd, but when she was your center midfielder and you had Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe and Tobin Heath, but then you also threw later in the mix Sam Mewis, the aforementioned Sam Mewis, and Lindsey Horan. You had a lot of players out there who were also smart and connected and playing an intelligent style of football too. So, and I just think that's where Spain is right now. I will not make the mistake of betting against Spain or Barcelona anymore.
Sure.
And that's what I say now until we get to the next Champions League final. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe
it could be a couple weeks from now, or you might fall back in love with Japan, and who knows? You might get a little wacky on your side as well.
Oh, damn, man, you're so right about that.
Yeah, come on, man, I know you. All right, man. So it looks like we both have Spain taking home the gold. The good news is the ball gets rolling this week, Thursday. The games kick off. Your boys will be back Thursday night. We're going to try to turn that one around ASAP. So make sure to keep it locked. Make sure to subscribe. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I feel like I've sufficiently covered some of my bases by trying to just put like a sneaky flyer out on Australia, a sneaky flyer out on Brazil. I'm trying to run the gamut here and protect myself. But yeah, man, I have almost forgotten that I like track and field and I like swimming and I mean, Jesus Christ, we talk about basketball enough on this show. There's a men's and women's basketball tournament happening at the Olympics too. I keep just thinking about the football though. So yeah, it's going to be hard to squeeze it all in, but God, the football is going to be so good. So I'm happy to grind all that tape.
Track and field too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you liked, subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over at your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle, for just being absolute top tier week in, week out. You already know what time it is. I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you. This has been another episode of Into the... Oh, wait, no, you already said that. Sorry. Okay, yes. Keep it locked with us. We appreciate you guys. And also, we're going to be trying to watch as many of these as possible. As we said, hit us up on Twitter, on the YouTube comments. Yep. We're on TikTok, Threads, just every social media platform. We're pretty much on all those except for Facebook. We're old. We're not that old yet. So, yeah, just let us know what you guys are seeing, too. Thanks for rocking with us. Let's get to this football, and we will talk to you guys very soon.